Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive. This week, I continue my series talking about the major archetypes of Shadowrun by talking about hackers. Now, I'm using the umbrella term hackers because it covers those who use cyberdecks, those who use comlinks, and, of course, technomancers and otaku. I'm going to touch a little bit on all of these because the matrix system for Shadowrun has kind of changed a lot over the editions. In fact, I'm going to say that the matrix is the single most changed element in the game from its first incarnation to its current. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as we talk about those who dance with electrons. Of all the archetypes for Shadowrun, the hacker is one of the most focused and specialized archetypes by its very nature. Being a hacker, whether you are a decker, a 4th edition era comlink hacker, an otaku, decker again, being a hacker, you do one thing, and one thing really, really well. You deal with the matrix. In 4th edition and later, you have augmented reality, which adds another layer to things, but at its core, the hacker in Shadowrun deals with the matrix. In the earliest editions, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, generally speaking, your hacker was never on site. This is because, for some reason, with very rare exceptions, Corps didn't air gap their equipment. It was just far easier for them to be able to access everything from behind walls of black ice and barrier ice and all that stuff than to go, yeah, this server has lots of important stuff on it. It's not connected to the matrix. No. This data store, it's going to be a red cube floating in here, and we're going to put a barrier ice, and then we're going to put a black ice right behind it. Yeah, that'll keep that data safe. And the high-end deckers really could crack their way through that. But, again, it was the high-end deckers that could do that. But in general, if you are building a hacker, regardless of what method you're taking, you're going to have a number of key things. First off, you're going to have high skills in anything relating to computers. Software, so you can code your own programs or tweak your own programs. Hardware, so you can repair and rebuild and soup up your deck. Electronic warfare. Just about every skill that in some way relates to computers or electronics is gonna be in your bailiwick. It does not matter whether you are a decker, an otaku, a decker adept, or a technomancer. You are going to have those skills. Technomancers will also kind of have the tasking skills, which lets them summon sprites, because technomancers don't really work the same way others do. The otaku were pretty much living cyberdecks. But the Otaku were sort of different than what would become the Technomancer. Though some Otaku did become Technomancers, Otaku had an expiration date for their abilities. And this is why most GMs didn't allow them. Because most GMs didn't want players playing something that was like 9 or 10 years old starting off, that would literally lose all their abilities by the time they turn 15 or 16 at the latest. And that's with some really good rolls to keep those abilities. But the Otaku had the benefit that they had both the benefit and drawback that they needed a data jack with assist put on, drilled into their heads. Now think about the ethics for a moment of you're drilling a piece of cyberware into a still growing kid's head. And you kind of understand part of the issues people had with Otaku. And unfortunately, I believe that these issues with Otaku kind of spilled over in early 4th edition to the Technomancers. Because people tended to look really, really negatively at Technomancers. When essentially what a Technomancer was Otaku without the horrific moral issues for being one, really. And that's kind of what I think they were going with the creation of Technomancers. Trying to make something like Otaku more palatable. Now, what you had with Technomancers is they don't have programs. They have complex forms. These frequently duplicate programs, but they can do other things. And that was one of the neat things about Technomancers in 4th edition. They kind of got nerfed in 5th edition with a lot of the things that made them cool, like the ability for a Technomancer to take a complex form that actually duplicated the software processing element of a smart link. They dropped that in 5th edition. That kind of makes me sad. They also kind of took away the ability for a non-initiated, submersion is what they called it, Technomancer to control drones. But that's for another discussion when I talk about riggers. But ultimately, when you build a hacker, you need to have your assortment of skills. And then comes your equipment. If you're a Technomancer, you just need something to, something to store data on. Basically, a fistful of microchips. As I mentioned, Otaku needed a data jack with a assist add-on to it. They were a little bit more costly back then because they were a specialized piece of equipment. Because normally your cyber deck ran your assist technology. The old school cyber decks, you needed ratings in your programs, so you needed high rating programs. You needed your persona chips, which were all your core stats, basically. And you needed a high-end deck. You wanted a deck that had fast input-output, fast load time, and lots of storage, because your programs took up storage. And this was it through 1st, 2nd, and 3rd edition. When you came into 4th edition, you needed a comlink and your hacking programs. You generally wanted to get the best comlink you could get out of character generation. Just like a decker wanted the best deck that they could afford out of character creation, because upgrading persona chips and programs was generally going to be cheaper than upgrading your deck. 5th edition brought back the cyber deck with the new matrix security protocols. And those simplified things. Now understand, 4th and 5th and 6th edition, one key thing that they all have in common is augmented reality hacking is a thing. And basically what augmented reality hacking is, it's hacking, but you're not in the Matrix, because everything kind of has an augmented reality layout, so you can, if someone has their pan active, you can find the icon, so to speak, for their gun and start doing stuff to it. Oh, they have a smart gun. Eject. Alright, I'm going to spoof eject the clip. That's like one of the easiest things to do. But, that was the sort of thing you were doing in these later editions. You were doing more moving about in meat space, because things were active in meat space because of the wireless matrix and all that stuff. And as I said, in 4th edition, you were able to do it with your comlink. You were able to hack systems and hack the planet with your smartphone. Yes, that is what 4th edition was like. Thankfully, in 5th edition, they actually went to, you needed a specialized piece of equipment to hack again. And that was such a good thing. Of course, one of the neat things with the 5th edition cyber decks is they had a array of stats that you could move around. Basically, you could allocate processing power to your attack, your evasion, etc., etc. And programs gave a flat bonus to one of these. For the comlink version of hacking, it was your skill plus your program. For the modern version, the 5th edition version, it was a case of you used the attribute and skill for what you were doing, and the limit was determined by the attributes of your deck. Now, towards the end of 5th edition, they introduced the Data Jack Plus. This was a data jack that could hold up to 3 programs in it. So this meant you could have, if you had a high-end deck plus a Data Jack Plus, you could have a lot more programs than most people had access to. And somehow, in the course of a single in-game year, the transition from 5th to 6th edition, the Data Jack Plus became the Cyberjack. And the Cyberjack holds some of the attributes for your Matrix work. Your Cyberdeck holds the other pair. And yeah. I'm not really that familiar with 6th, so I can't really say exactly how it works. But I just know Deckers in 6th became a whole lot more expensive to build. Now, this is talking, of course, about the purely electronic hackers. For the other form of hackers, the Technomancers, these are the mainstream alternative. They are from 4th edition onwards, and basically you buy complex forms which work like programs that just work a little bit differently. And more importantly, you have to make sure you have the right attributes. Because essentially each of your mental attributes is some element of your cyber deck. Like your willpower is your firewall. Your charisma is your signal. That sort of thing. So a Technomancer is going to be someone that you're going to be tending to put attributes into a bit higher of a priority. And then you have to remember that a Technomancer has 2 major drawbacks. Drawback 1, they can't turn off their AR. They go into a spam zone, they can get overwhelmed because they can't turn off their augmented reality, because they live in perpetual augmented reality, because they are perpetually interacting with the Matrix. At least the surface levels of it. And then, of course, they can go full VR like that, because they don't have to jack into anywhere. The second major issue for the Technomancers is they are their deck. Anything that damages anything that would damage a cyber deck can damage them. See, a normal hacker, oh, you fried my deck, I'll just fix it up. A Technomancer, oh, you were frying me with stuff that's meant to hurt a deck. Ow. So, Technomancers are a very niche build, especially in 5th edition. And I will say this, it is my firm belief that if you have a Technomancer and a Decker working together in 5th edition, like the Technomancer takes the complex forms that allow them to reduce the Overwatch count on the Decker, you essentially have a unbeatable pair, because there is so much synergy between the two. You know, there's things that the Decker can do that the Technomancer can't. There's things that Technomancer can do that not only can the Decker not do, but buff the Decker. And when you take that combination, if you actually have a Decker and Technomancer player sit down, and build their characters together, work them out, you have a near unstoppable duo in the Matrix. Of course, there is something truly scary. Take a normal decker, and instead of putting all sorts of fancy cyberware in them to boost their decking ability, etc., you give them just the basics. Data jack, some hardening if your edition has it. But but as you are building them, make them an adept. And use every skill or attribute boosting ability you can, to bump up their Matrix skills. It is entirely possible to build a hacker adept, a decker adept, that can out hack anyone, just because adept powers combined with their natural skills and talents. Of course, for the different archetypes, there's different ways you can spend them. You can put them focusing on stealth work, on AR hacking, all sorts of different methods. But ultimately, what you do as a hacker is you hack the planet. One of the fun things from 4th edition was a little rule that lets you spoof your lifestyle. You basically would make a roll every month to get you the lifestyle you wanted for that month. Yeah, think about that. You could spoof yourself a luxury lifestyle for a month if you had the skills. In one of my games in Neo Tokyo, I had a player who never paid for his lifestyle. He kept himself spoofed at a medium or high lifestyle, just because he could. But with that is where I'm going to end this week's discussion. Next week, I'm going to talk about my favorite archetype. Or should I say, I'm going to talk about my archetype. The Rigger. Until then, I'd like you all to remember to have fun and keep gaming.